Thanks so much for joining us for 12 News at 4. I'm Tram Mai. Firefighters are still struggling to gain control over two wildfires still burning at the Grand Canyon. The Dragon Bravo fire has destroyed between 50 to 80 structures, including the historic Grand Canyon Lodge, which has been there for almost a century. We'll have more on its significance in a moment. But first, right now, that fire is 0% contained. Also nearby, the White Sage fire is still burning near Jacob Lake, and firefighters have no control over that one either. It's ripped through more than 49,000 acres. Despite the fire's rapid growth and challenging conditions, no structures have been lost. Mandatory evacuations remain in place, and fire crews say it may still be days before conditions allow them to gain control. This afternoon, the National Park Service is facing some tough questions about its response to the Dragon Bravo fire. Why didn't firefighters attack the flames sooner before dozens of buildings were lost? 12 News journalist Joe Dana is at the South Rim with new statements, pushback from retired firefighters, and calls for a federal investigation.
For the first time, we're hearing from someone in Washington, D.C. at the National Park Service defending how they have managed this fire, which completely blew up the strategy that was in place. We've heard from several critics asking why they did not immediately attempt to snuff out the fire within the first few days. A timeline shows fire danger in the Kaibab Forest was very high in the days before the lightning strike on July 4th. It slowly grew, but even on the 10th, the Park Service still had a confine and contain strategy in place, not a direct attack strategy. It was not until after evacuations and the destruction of buildings and cabins on the 11th and 12th when air tankers were finally dispatched to the fire on the 13th. Now, hindsight is always 20/20, but I have talked to a number of wildland firefighters and former fire managers who care deeply about this region, who have expressed concern about how this fire was managed. One retired officer with the Forest Service saying, "I'm disturbed why the park would make a management decision to allow it to burn. Normally, you wouldn't let a fire burn in late June and early July." Another retired Park Service employee of 43 years who fought wildland fires and actually grew up here in the region, telling me, "I love the Park Service. I can't second guess them. But I would say there was a good chance institutional knowledge wasn't there to make the right decisions." That former employee is referring to the fact the Park Service has lost about 20 to 25% of employees under the so-called Doge cuts and early retirements. I can tell you a Park Service employee here told me yesterday those cuts did not impact public safety. And this morning, the acting assistant director for the Park Service in D.C. telling us in part, quote, "The National Park Service and our interagency partners actively fought the Dragon Bravo fire, employing tactics that met the suppression objectives and mitigated risks. Firefighters had constructed containment lines and were prepared to conduct a defensive firing operation before conditions rapidly changed. Hundreds of lives were saved due to the fact this fire was expertly handled." Expect that debate to continue as there are calls for an independent investigation. And finally, we have our first look at how the fire tore through parts of the North Rim development. As you can see, large swaths of cabins and government buildings were destroyed, others damaged. However, a massive emergency services building was spared. That is the good news. Meanwhile, back here at the South Rim of the Grand Canyon, it is bustling with tourists. Hiking trails in the lower half of the canyon remain limited or closed altogether as smoke remains a big concern. At the South Rim, Joe Dana, 12 News.